I was a pretty lonely kid growing up. Whenever I wasn't at school, I would stay in my room, reading books, watching cartoons, or playing video games. The consoles I played the most during my early years were the Nintendo DS and later the 3DS. And after becoming a Persona fan through playing Portable, I sought after similar games on the 3DS. That led me to playing Persona Q, which is a story for another day. As luck would have it, Johnny Awesome was midway through his Let's Play of a different SMT spin-off series by the time I was looking for more games like Persona to play. The game was Double Survivor 2 Record Breaker, a game that was exclusive to the 3DS. I watched that first episode of Johnny's LP, got hooked, and asked my dad to buy the game for me so I could play through the rest of it on my own. I vaguely recall my first ever playthrough of DS2. All I know for sure is that I gave up on day 6 because I couldn't beat the boss at the end of it. Anyway, I would come back years later to finish the game, including the new storyline added in Record Breaker. I've seen multiple videos by big SMT tubers, I think that's the term for them, highlighting the first Double Survivor game and its remake, Overclocked, but barely any videos made recently acknowledging the sequel's existence. I have played Overclocked, and that game deserves the praise it gets, but it's a shame DS2 isn't talked about as much. In my opinion, it's a worthy successor to the first game and overall a solid title in general. But we're not here just to talk about Double Survivor 2 the game. In 2013, Double Survivor 2 received an anime adaptation by Studio Bridge. Looking at their catalog, there aren't any shows I recognize other than them being the lead studio for the Yu-Gi-Oh anime from 7s onwards. The director of the DS2 anime is someone you might recognize if you're a big Atlus fan, as Seiji Kishi directed Persona 4 the animation, and was the supervisor for the Persona 3 movies, so it is possible this could be another good video game adaptation under his belt. Just ignore the fact he also directed the Golden animation and both Danganronpa anime. The less I think about them, the better. Due to Atlus's mixed track records with adaptations of their games, I went into this anime with neutral expectations in order to judge it fairly. And well, you saw the thumbnail and the title. Double Survivor 2 the animation actually manages to be a good adaptation of the source material, and even does some things better than the game did. So sit back and relax as I explain how the Double Survivor 2 anime succeeds as an adaptation. Naturally, there will be spoilers for DS2 in this video. I'd recommend playing the game before hopping in, but if you don't care about spoilers, by all means keep watching. Something I always find interesting with adaptations like this is how they handle the silent protagonist. In the Persona games, while the main character's personality is shaped by the player, which is their whole point as they're meant to be stand-ins, the dialogue options and actions and cutscenes do hint towards intended personalities. In the case of Double Survivor 2's protagonist, canon name Hibiki Kuze, with the plenty of comical dialogue options, it can be read that he's typically someone who tries to be humorous and add levity to situations whenever possible. The anime's interpretation of Hibiki is a laid-back and subdued guy. He puts on a cheerful demeanor in even the bleakest situations, looking on the bright side and comforting others with his smile. He's thankfully not bland or passive like how Ren was for a majority of the Persona 5 anime. He's a protective person, initially choosing to work with Gyps after realizing he can use the demon summoning program to keep people safe. He's also quick to blame himself when something goes wrong and people get hurt, seeing it as him failing to help the people around him. His desire to ensure the safety of others borders on self-sacrificial at points when Daichi and Io reunite with him in Nagoya and tell him he's seemingly fated to die against Fecta. Even when he knows he could very well die, he doesn't run away. He chooses to stay and join the fight against the Septentrion because he wants to keep the resistance out of harm's way. I like the characterization this version of Hibiki gets. He's much more of a well-rounded character than I was expecting. Having him be a total jokester all the time would have hurt the general tone of the plot and would have felt a bit redundant due to Daichi already filling in for comic relief. So I like how the two have more of a goofball and straight man type dynamic in this. Or may I just prefer this because these two remind me of Rindo and Fred from Neo the World Ends With You. His characterization is heightened by the vocal performances of his actors. I watched the English dub, which has a different voice cast for everyone than the voice actors we got in Record Breaker. Hibiki is voiced by Patrick Poole, who does a good job conveying emotion through the character's usually soft and pensive manner of speaking. And in moments where Hibiki loudly expresses his emotions, Patrick's performance really shines. He hasn't had any voice acting credits in the last couple of years, and I hope he gets to be in another project in the near future. This was my first time hearing a role of his, and I have to say he did a great job. In fact, everyone was great in their roles. I was so used to the cast from Record Breaker that it took some time to get accustomed to the different voices, but everyone did good. Hell, I'd argue some voice actors here in the anime do a better job portraying the characters than the VAs in Record Breaker. To bring the topic back to Hibiki, his protectiveness does play into a recurring plot point in DS2. You see, the protagonist and his friends get their ability to summon demons from the app Nicaea. At least once a day, Nicaea sends the party a death video, which foretells how someone will die. As the player, you need to plan your days around these death videos to ensure that the characters involved survive. In the anime, after Hibiki and his friends barely escape their own deaths multiple times, the first time they get a death video not involving them is in episode 3. After having just met rookie GIPS agent Keita Wakui, them and new teammate Hinako receive a Nicaea video of his imminent death. They go to Festival Gate to join the fight against Boris and save Keita, but he still dies. And as morbid as this might sound, I think Keita's death actually works in favor of the anime's tone of events. One, we only have 13 episodes. As I elaborated on in my Divine Gate video, it's nearly impossible to handle a huge cast of characters without the necessary amount of time that a 12-episode season doesn't provide. So in that sense, killing off characters like Keita is a good decision. And two, Keita's death is used in the narrative to progress Hibiki's development. Yamato's indifference to Keita's death and his willingness to sacrifice a ton of GIPS agents in the fight against Merrick opens Hibiki's eyes to how little the chief thinks of those he doesn't deem as valuable pawns. Hibiki staunchly opposes this and goes against Yamato's plans, and by the end of the episode, chooses to go with Ronaldo and hear out his egalitarian views. When Otome questions Hibiki about his change in allegiance, he explains how he joined the resistance because he felt he'd be able to protect everyone if he was with them instead of GIPS, criticizing Yamato's methods of using his soldiers as human shields. Otome questions if that means Hibiki thinks Ronaldo is 100% in the right, to which Hibiki says this:
"At the very least, he's not gonna sacrifice other people."
This is good narrative progression, seamlessly introducing Ronaldo, his resistance against GIPS, and his philosophy in such a concise way. It also helps cement Hibiki as a character, showing how he has his own ideals that clash with Yamato's, and thus you'll likely get invested in his character. So when he feels emotionally crushed by the deaths of his allies, you feel crushed alongside him. A lot of characters end up dying in the anime, but it's never for the sake of surprising the audience with senseless blood and gore. Every death serves a point, and the anime does a good job of giving you reasons to care about these characters before they bite the bullet. The deaths progress the character arcs of the survivors, as well as establishing just how deadly the Septentrions are. That's another thing I wondered before hopping in. How would they handle the Septentrions? These star-themed bosses are the big enemies of each day, similar to the full moon shadows from Persona 3. The Septentrions are otherworldly in nature, and they come with their own unique mechanics that are meant to test your ability to strategize on the fly. Each Septentrion progressively gets bigger and more abstract in their designs than the last. Add on the fact that a lot of the time they show up earlier in the day and you have to retreat and find the means to defeat them later, they continuously add much needed tension to the game. The first episode initially led me to believe they wouldn't be able to capture this same sense of scale and terror the game does. They combined Dubei's introduction on the first day and when it gets taken out by the heroes into one scene. Dubei doesn't leave much of an impression because it's gone as soon as it appears. Another consequence of this combination is obviously the removal of all the events that happen in between these two scenes from the game, such as Joe's introduction and joining the team. Joe doesn't show up until episode 5, though I will concede it makes sense to introduce him as a member of Ronaldo's resistance, as he does join the faction at the end of the game. Dubei's reduced screen time made me worried that these big threats would only appear for a few minutes each to cap off an episode. But then episode 4 happens and we get the battle against Merrick. It captures that sense of fighting an overpowered enemy perfectly. Merrick in the game was pretty imposing even if its sprite had to be scaled down to fit on the screen. In the anime, we see it at its true size, and it's a damn kaiju with a freeze ray. The entire episode is dedicated to fighting off Merrick, and it does an excellent job at setting up just how much of a threat these things are to this world and the characters. While most of the Septentrions after Merrick don't get as much focus, the anime still takes time to show the destructive ramifications of their powers in the battles against them. These things are tanky, they take tons of hits before they finally go down. You know what else can take a lot of hits? The like and subscribe buttons. Shameless plug, but every interaction with my channel and content seriously helps me out as a smaller creator, so please consider it. Anyway, back to DS2. While on the topic of the Septentrions, there's another otherworldly figure we need to talk about, the Anguished One. To set the stage here, the Anguished One is my favorite character in Devil Survivor 2, and just so happens to also be one of my favorite fictional characters of all time. I enjoy everything about this character, so I was definitely curious to see how the anime would handle him. The Anguished One, also known as Alcor and Al Siduk, is an eccentric alien who loves and is deeply fascinated with humanity. Just like how Prometheus defied the gods to help humanity in Greek mythology, Psyduke defied Polaris and the other Septentrions to help truly kickstart human civilization. Him making Nicaea and its demon summoning program was another act of support for humanity, hoping they'd use the app to survive the impending trial. However, because he helped humanity all the way back then, he blames himself for how the species turned out in the modern day, them being forced to face Polaris' trial, and many having lost the will to live. He feels regret with how Yamato sought to use the tools he gave the chief of Gyps to create a world of meritocracy. That's why he takes such an interest in the player character and calls them Shining One, as he sees you as the beacon of hope that he once saw Yamato as, but has hope that unlike Yamato, you will choose a path that gives humanity the freedom to further tap into their potential. The anime captures Alcor flawlessly, and the first part of episode 9 is the perfect showcase of him. His conversation with Hibiki carries the same vibe as the conversations you and him have in the game, and the few comedic scenes between him and the main trio are super charming and are great at conveying his oddities. He stops floating and tries learning how to walk. Like, come on, that's adorable. Speaking of the main trio, I want to briefly touch on Daichi and Io. Their characters are also handled well in the anime. Honestly, I'd argue they're both better here than in the original game. Again, it helps that Hibiki has his own character in the anime, so both of his friends can play off of his personality in interesting ways. Daichi's struggle to prove himself useful in stopping the apocalypse is shown visually by how his selection of demons for most of the show are all low-level weaklings. Just like his best friend Hibiki, he wants to use his power to help people, but the power he holds isn't enough to make that much of a difference. That is until his desire to help Hibiki becomes so strong that he's able to summon a new demon. The absolute GOAT, Black Frost. He-ho! God, that's... But yeah, Daichi's cowardice is nowhere near as prominent here, and I honestly think it's for the better. Him being the kind of person who wants to help but doesn't have the means to is a lot more compelling of an arc to watch. Io also serves as a foil to Hibiki, highlighting his self-sacrificial side. She's still very polite, soft-spoken, and sweet, but not to the same level of being a total pushover who is too afraid to speak her own mind like she is in the game. Her bottling up her feelings is still present, just thankfully not to the same extent. Her arc in the game is good on paper, I just think they played too much into the trope that it got annoying. In episode 10, despite how afraid she is to do so, she agrees to sacrifice herself to become Luke's vessel and stop Mizar. This scenario was already handled decently well in the game, but I prefer how it's done in the anime. Hibiki reaches out to her, trying to break her free of Luke's control. It's here we learn Io doesn't see much value in her life at this point after losing her parents, and thought sacrificing herself to ensure her friends survived was the best choice. She sees herself as too weak to keep pushing forward like everyone else, but Hibiki tells her it's okay to be weak and rely on others, admitting he's relied on Daichi and Io a ton throughout this apocalypse. And I swear to you, this scene between the two of them is genuinely amazing. I suggest you guys check out this anime and watch this moment for yourselves. I seriously think it is that well done. It's crazy how much the anime sold me on Io, a character I was indifferent to in the game. They really nailed her character here. With Hibiki's two best friends out of the way, there's one more central character I want to talk about. The chief of Gyps himself, Yamato Hotsuin. Yamato is the Edelgard of Devil Survivor 2, and that he is a reliable ally so long as you pick his route. If you choose to side with anyone else at the end of your playthrough, he's nothing short of a formidable foe. Since the anime is adapting what is considered to be the true route of the game, Yamato is written to be an outright antagonist. And it works! Forgive the tangent here, this will wrap back around to Yamato, I promise. There are pieces of information that the characters learn about much earlier in the anime than they did in the game, such as the extraterrestrials being called Septentrions. We don't get this name for them until the Anguished One drops it when we first meet him on the 4th day. In the anime, Yamato and Makoto already know this and inform Hibiki of the Septentrions by the 2nd episode. Despite how pedantic I may sound right now, I don't see this as an issue. The anime was obviously going to be paced differently than the game, so reorganizing how characters are introduced and how lore is drip-fed to us over the course of the story is fine, so long as it makes sense. I was worried at first that this would fly in the face of a key trait of Yamato's character, that being his manipulative tendencies. He only tells you what he wants you to know and nothing more, so you're more inclined to side with him. These words were quickly dashed when it was revealed just how much Yamato was still keeping secret from the rest of the cast. You see, just like in the game, Alcor informed Yamato in the past about Polaris and the Septentrion's upcoming invasion, but in the anime, it's further clarified exactly how much Alcor told the young chief. From the start, Yamato knew what each Septentrion was capable of, how to beat them, and came up with general plans to take them out. The medical exam scene, which was originally used in the game as a silly moment for fan service that eventually tied into the main plot, is put into the anime and established to be a necessary part of Yamato's grand scheme. In the game, Io being picked as the host for Luke because of her medical results felt like the unintended benefit of having everyone's records. In the anime, it was an intentional choice to have it happen, as it's also used to determine who is necessary to summon Shiva and Kama so Alioth can be shot down. This is such a genius change, and further goes to show how Yamato is not someone to be trifled with. He is a man willing to sacrifice as many lives as he deems necessary to ensure he makes it to Polaris and reforges the world to match his grand vision. And this is where he and Hibiki come into conflict. While Daichi and Io serve as positive foils for Hibiki, Yamato is the protagonist's polar opposite. Hibiki is an open, pleasant, down-to-earth guy, while Yamato holds himself as this distant, powerful figure who is so far above the rest of humanity. For as much as Hibiki sees all human life as valuable, Yamato just as strongly sees people as expendable resources to help him achieve his own ends. If you're not useful to him, you're better off dead. The duality is pretty blatant, especially after Hibiki taps into the Dragon Stream, the same source of magic that Yamato uses. Yamato is so steadfast in his beliefs because he grew up in an environment where he had nothing akin to a normal childhood. He was strictly raised to follow this might makes right mentality, and the young man he is in the present day is the result of that. He thinks everything is preordained by Polaris, who is essentially God. However, as proven by Alcor, Polaris is not a flawless being. He sees himself as the one being who can overcome Polaris' trial and reshape humanity to be what he thinks is better. But as Hibiki keeps pointing out, one man should not have all that power. Every person should be able to think and act for themselves without having someone or something forcing a certain way of thinking onto them. And that's the root of Yamato's character flaws. He's lonely. He feels the need to carry the burdens of all humanity completely on his own. Despite how cold and hostile he acts towards Hibiki in the second half of the show, Yamato thinks highly of him and views him as the closest thing he has to a friendship, indicated by how he got a death video of Hibiki like Daichi and Io did. However, Yamato is so stubborn that he refuses to open up to Hibiki until the bitter end, until he finally lets his fellow demon tamer's sympathy and kindness reach him as he's dying in his arms. The anime ends similarly to Daichi's Restore ending from the game, with Hibiki wishing Polaris to reset the world back to before the invasion started, meaning everyone who died during the last 7 days are alive once more. Everyone lost their memories of the week-long apocalypse, only for Hibiki to suddenly remember and go look for Yamato. He does eventually bump into him, with Yamato claiming he doesn't know Hibiki because he doesn't have any friends. And then, he smiles at Hibiki, signaling to him that he does remember what happened. This last bit of the final episode fixes the biggest issue a lot of people have about reset endings like the one from the original game. In the game, it didn't feel like much of a satisfactory conclusion to everything that had happened prior. But in the anime, having Hibiki and Yamato remember the past world, with the latter learning to shed his old ways to walk down a better path, is so much better. It makes the entire season before this still feel like it mattered. I can't express enough how much this small change improves the true ending of the OG game. Okay, I'm on page 9 of the script. I think it's about time I wrap this up. Do I think Devil Survivor 2 is a masterpiece in gaming? Not really. It's like a 7 or 8 out of 10 for me personally. It has its flaws, a lot of them honestly, but what the game gets right, it really gets right. For as hit and miss as the cast of DS2 is, the best characters from this game are super well written. These good aspects very much outweigh the bad for me, and that's why I still have a soft spot for Devil Survivor 2 all these years later. I'm super happy to see that the anime turned out as amazing as it did. The changes it makes in adapting the source material are well executed, and even do a better job than the original game in some respects, as I've made clear throughout this video. Though I guess to make sense, this game in particular would end up being a good anime, as the whole story is one big Avo reference. I don't know exactly how deep the references go, because I've only consumed Evangelion through the memes and haven't watched any of the shows. You guys can roast me in the comments about that all you want, I'll allow it. Jokes aside, it baffles me how overlooked this anime is. I scoured through YouTube and couldn't find anyone else talking about this show similar to how I have in this video. That's a damn shame, because it's such a good show and a great adaptation of its source material. I haven't checked its score or reviews on sites like Mao, so I don't know if me liking this show is a hot take or not, but I'm not afraid to play contrarian if I have to and sing praises to this anime. This is legitimately on the same level of Persona 4 the animation of solid game to anime adaptations, and I will die on this hill. If you like Devil Survivor 2, please go watch this anime. There's some seriously great stuff in these 13 episodes. If you haven't played DS2 and watched this video without caring about spoilers, I'd recommend playing the game first before watching the anime. There's still a ton of content in the game I haven't mentioned that's worth seeing for yourself, including a whole new storyline and record breaker, which I have mixed feelings about, but we aren't here to talk about it, so who cares? I'll end off the video by summing up the thesis statement of Devil Survivor 2. There's a lot wrong with our world, so much that needs fixing. But the change humanity needs to go through to fix all those problems won't occur if it's forced upon us by one being, whether they be a human or a god. Humanity has the limitless freedom to choose their own paths in life. By choosing, of our own free will, to actively make a change for the better, we can improve the world we live in one step at a time. Many thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your way out. Also, if anyone working at Atlus is watching this, I have a special message specifically for you. Give us Devil Survivor 3, you cowards!